All right, let's continue our conversation on Stoicism, going over the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. There was a tear. I taped it. Okay, we had landed in book 11, and last time we did section 8. If you've seen that last video, maybe bear in mind that quick discussion I had about flat Earth theorists, because I think that kind of comes to play a bit here, but I'll try to approach it a little differently in this section. That was section 8. This is section 9. Just as those who try to block your progress along the straight path of reason will not be able to divert you from principled action, so you must not let them knock you out of your goodwill towards them. Rather, you should watch yourself equally on both fronts, keeping not only a stability of judgment and action, but also a mild response to those who try to stop you or who are otherwise disaffected. To be angry with them is no less a weakness than to abandon your course of action and capitulate in panic. Both amount equally to desertion of duty, either being frightened into retreat or setting yourself at odds with your natural kinsmen and friends. I think there are some interesting things to be said here. So first of all, we have a theme that we have also seen in Epictetus a long time ago, which is that of, I think his words were something like what it means to be a true philosopher, or something along those lines. What I wanted to focus on now was the principle of, imagine you think Stoicism is kind of helpful. Stoicism is kind of useful in my life. Stoicism seems to maybe make me a more stable person. And then someone comes along and that person says, well, Stoicism is wrong. And this, and this is why. This was European. This, and this is why for my North American friends. So why is that a problem when those people come along? Well, it could be a problem because they could dissuade you from your current path. And if Stoicism is something that works for you, or if anything, whatever works for you, but this is a series on Stoicism, so I'm working on the assumption that if you've made it this far, then Stoicism seems to be working out for you. Then you have a problem. And the problem is that people come by and they say, but this is wrong and it doesn't work because of this, that, and the other. Well, I think that any school of thought, Stoicism included, has certain shortcomings. And I think one of the potential shortcomings of Stoicism is, what do you do in extreme cases? What do you do in extreme cases? And there is some evidence that in extreme cases Stoicism works. There is James Stockdale, who was shot down and in his airplane, and who crashed and spent the war in a POW camp. This is real. He has written about this himself. And he was a student of Stoicism. He had read Epictetus's Enchiridion, and he even says, and I hope I kind of get because this is from the top of my head, but his quote was something along the lines of, as his plane was going down, his thoughts were, now I'm leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus. He is caught, he's in a POW camp, he is tortured fairly brutally, multiple bones in his body are broken, so it's significant, the circumstances he's in, and yet he keeps his sanity. And in fact, he leads other soldiers in that camp, not necessarily to escape, but to rebel in small ways, to keep their sanity, to keep resisting. And he is not broken. Of the entire course of time that he spends in that POW camp, he's not broken. And he has spoken quite openly about that was due to Stoicism, his adherence to Stoic principles. Well, that is, I think, for most of us, as gruesome as it gets. You're being tortured, and there is always that often quoted image of the Stoic sage being tortured and not, I don't want to say not caring, but not being perturbed. And then people say, well, that's impossible. Well, apparently not, because that's what James Stockdale did. So just saying. In any case, in these extreme scenarios, right, things can be a little different. But apparently even then, Stoicism does not necessarily break down. Anyway, there might be people who come across, this was a bit of a sidetrack, and I do apologize, but I think the story of James Stockdale is very interesting. There will be people who try to dissuade you. Now, Marcus Aurelius says here, I think is very interesting. Because he says two things. Not only should you not allow yourself to be dissuaded, because that's basically, how did he put it? That's like, either being frightened into retreat. Sorry. So, yes, then you are being frightened into retreat. Well, Stoicism doesn't work. Oh, really? Oh, well, then I guess I should do something else. Oh, but it worked for you. Now, nothing works for everyone, right? I always like to use some everyday examples. I mean, I have a specific teaching style, and you've experienced it, because the way I do these videos, or even do my pen reviews, that's pretty much my teaching style, because that's who I am. And I think that teaching style, I like to think that teaching style works for a lot of people, but there are people for whom it does not work, and that's perfectly fine, because everybody has their own style. In the same way, specific schools of thought cannot work for everyone. That's impossible, right? I think it would be very, very interesting of a world if everyone was a Stoic, like an actual, sincere, practicing Stoic. I think the world would be very different, but that's not the case. So then if people try to dissuade you and you just say, oh, sorry, well, I'll do something else, then you're kind of giving in, and that is a bad thing. But I think the second thought that Marcus Aurelius has here is a beautiful one. And again, this is kind of where the flat earth theory comes in that I talked about last time. Because he also says, so you must not let them knock you out of your goodwill towards them. Rather, you should watch yourself equally on both fronts, keeping not only a stability of judgment and action, but also a mild response to those who try to stop you or are otherwise disaffected. So even those people, to put it bluntly, who are not for you, then they are against you, even those people who are against you, you should try to look upon with kindness. And this is really hard. This is very hard. And I can't do it all the time. That's not just talking about people trying to dissuade me from Stoicism, because that doesn't happen that often, but I think you understand what I mean. There will be people in life who try to dissuade you, who try to convince you that you are wrong. This happens to me in pen reviews, I don't want to say all the time, but it happens quite a lot. That for example, people get upset that I am not incredibly positive about a pen that they love, and then they start to push back, and they're instead of just thinking, well, his opinion is his and my opinion is mine, they try to convince me that my opinion is wrong. And I think one powerful demonstration of that came when I was not very positive about a Nicaea pen. This is years ago. And someone commented, and a comment always stood out to me. I paraphrase a little, but it came down to, well, it's not surprising that you don't like Nicaea because you come from an uncultured country. So in other words, Japan has culture, and the Rouge is it's culture, but the Netherlands has no culture whatsoever. Well, that's a discussion for another day, but obviously there is culture in the Netherlands. We have a society that goes back quite a while as well, and I'm not a particularly pronounced Dutch patriot, but that's kind of an odd argument, right? So, okay, I didn't like the pen that you like, but that doesn't mean that my country is uncultured. And in such a case, it is hard for a person, like me, for example, to then respond to that person with kindness. Because to be honest, my first reaction is, are you out of your damn mind? Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you say that? But that would be an unstoic response. So this is something that I know, for me, remains a continuous path of development and progress. I have to keep working on that. And that's kind of the charm of Stoicism, isn't it? Like the making progress part. And I do think I've made progress, but it's still hard sometimes. But if I can do it, if I'm calm enough to think, okay, that was a very obnoxious comment that's actually very personal, and those are the ones that kind of get to you, not someone telling you that you're ugly or something, like, yeah, sure, whatever. But if it's really personal, it's easy to respond with a whistling backhand, right? But if you can take that step back, in modern psychological terms, cognitively distance yourself from that scenario, and then try to respond with kindness. And that could be easy. In this case, the Urushi, what was it, the Nikaya case, it could be something, sorry, it's Nakaya, isn't it? Anyway, it's not a pen review here. If you could think, but I understand where this guy is coming from. This is a pen that he loves, and you weren't particularly positive about it, so now he may be offended. It's okay. Like, you can be offended. Then your anger or annoyance kind of dissipates, and quite naturally so. Because this really ties in, I think, to one of the last things we talked about, if you try to consider someone else's perspective. And instead of letting them get to you, you respond with kindness. It's very hard, but I think that, again, it's something I want to get better at, because if you can do that, it's amazing. You should try it once. The next time you're annoyed, try to take a deep breath and then try to come up with something kind. Well, I understand where you're coming from. Agree to disagree, so to speak. It can make a huge difference, but it's hard. And I think it's a very powerful statement, not just in your Stoic path, but in general. I think this is something that can really make a big difference in your life. Anyway, enough rambling for one day. I hope this was useful. Let me know what you think. Is this something that is easy for you? Is it complicated? Is it something that comes naturally to you? Or do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? Of course, there are limitations here too. I think there are cases where responding with kindness is not appropriate. But again, that we kind of get into extreme cases, and I'm really trying to keep focused here on everyday annoyances, everyday occurrences, etc. I hope this was useful. I'll see you again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Bye.